So, quick rundown of everything and how this goes. This is just our Ask Me Anything webinar series. So, here's how it goes. They'll type in their their questions. I'll read them to you. You just answer them. Now, they can ask anything. It does not mean I have to read that question. And it does not mean that you have to answer it. As I told our previous guest, my brother got through his teenage years with no comment. So that works here as well. And don't worry, is her name pronounced Shireen?
Yep, Shireen.
Shireen,
yep.
I told her either yesterday or the day before, don't worry, you're not going to get bombarded with a lot of HR policy questions. That is not the intent of this. It is just a way for people in the union to connect with other people on campus and learn more about them, who they are, and things like that. Do you have any questions so far?
Do I need a panic button? No, I'm good.
All right. So I think we should just jump in on the good stuff, like the greatest thing ever. By the way, I don't know if anyone else knows. I should introduce our panelists. This is Becci Menghini, Vice Chancellor for Human Resources, Equity, and I always leave out a word, and something compliance.
Equal opportunity and compliance.
Equal opportunity and compliance. Okay, that's the E and the O. I got it. Who I have said this on numerous occasions to numerous people, one of my favorite people on the planet. So we're going to try to have a really good time. So let's jump right in. Tell us all about it. The Wienermobile.
My claim to fame.
Yes.
I once drove the 2-ton bun of fun. I was an anthropology major pre-med as an undergrad, and I volunteered on an ambulance to get some additional experience. And the day of my calculus exam, I was first on scene when this is actually more poignant than I thought, when a cop shot a guy from point blank distance. And I was the first on the scene, and I had to cut the guy's clothes off and sort of help get him stable. And I went back to campus later that day and realized, like, I don't think I'm ready to go to medical school. So I started thinking about what was next. And I decided, obvious switch when you're an anthropology major, I'm going to go into public relations. And I started contacting people who I knew who were in that field. And I contacted a friend who was working in Chicago at the time. And she said, I can help you get into PR, but I think what you should do is drive the Wienermobile. I was like, I don't really think you can just do that, can you? And she had. And she told me to be creative. More people apply to drive the Wienermobile than apply to Harvard Law School. And many fewer people become Wienermobile drivers, or hot doggers, as we were called. And so I drafted a creative cover letter and updated my resume. And I bought matching red and yellow ketchup and mustard bottles. And I put them inside and I mailed them away. And several weeks later, I got a call, and they told me they were flying me to Wisconsin to interview. And I grew up in Wisconsin. I went to college in Pennsylvania. So this was like a free trip home for me. And I was terribly excited about that. And I flew and got as far as Chicago, and my flight was canceled to Madison. And I called and said, listen, my flight's canceled. I could take the bus. I could wait for the next flight, but it's Friday afternoon. How do you want me to deal with this? And they waited, and I had an interview late on the Friday, and thankfully they did not make me sing as part of that interview, or I certainly would not have gotten the job. But I got a call the following week saying I had gotten the job, and in part because I didn't go crazy when my flight was changed. And really everything with the Wienermobile goes wrong all the time. So they really want to find people who can remain calm under pressure. And so I was invited to Hot Dog High, which is where you do the training to drive the Wienermobile. And there I learned that I had to sing as part of this job. And I ended up singing on national television, which is the last time anyone will ever hear me sing out loud. And then I drove the dog up and down the Eastern Seaboard, and we auditioned kids to be in a Super Bowl commercial. And my team, the Wienermobile and PETA don't have a particularly strong relationship. People for the ethical treatment of animals regularly would come out and protest the Wienermobile, and they were moving their headquarters that year to Richmond, Virginia. So because I was on the Eastern Seaboard, my team had bodyguards, and my bodyguards, when they were not guarding the Wienermobile, were one was a former Secret Service agent, and the other one was in charge of the Saudi Arabian embassy when he wasn't guarding the dog. So I felt a lot like Whitney Houston in that I had a bodyguard, and I drove a 23-foot hot dog. And my best story, or one of my favorite stories, is the time I chased a carload of nuns down an interstate in Ohio, and they passed me going about 90. And I turned to my partner in the Wienermobile, and I was like, "Hey, that's what I need, a habit, and I will never get pulled over." And she looked at me and she's like, "You're driving a 23-foot hot dog." And I was like, "You're right." It's gunned it. And we were sort of drove like this for a long time. And then I was running out of gas, so I put my blinker on, and they were quite a ways ahead of me, but they slowed way down and put their blinker on, and we both pulled off. And I got to the gas station, and I started filling up, and the one nun got out of the car, and she said, "Do you want to have lunch?" So we went next door to the Cracker Barrel, and we all got seated, and then over the loudspeaker at the Cracker Barrel, the driver of the Wienermobile left their lights on. It's not obvious who came in with that, so I had to run out, and the Wienermobile has a gull-wing door, so I opened the door and climb up over the engine and down into the seats. It was built on the chassis of an 88 Chevy van. Shove the lights off, climb back over the seats, turn the gull-wing door and go running in. And the nuns looked at me and said, "Now they think we came here in that." But I have lots of Wienermobile stories, but we don't have that much time.
No, we don't, but we do have some Wienermobile follow-up questions.
Okay.
One question not necessarily about the Wienermobile, but about the singing.
Yeah.
And is there footage of this anywhere?
You said I didn't have to answer a question.
You don't have to answer. You don't have to answer that. And sometimes your non-answer lets people know the truth. So inside the Wienermobile, what is it like? Is it like an RV and you live in it? Or is it
No,
like
the Wienermobile is like, so the one I drove was an 88 dog. It was built on the chassis of a 1988 Chevy Chevy van. And this is going to sound ridiculous. I mean, all of it sounds ridiculous, let's be honest. But the buns were wider than the dog, like a traditional hot dog. So the base was wide, and then there was a narrower hot dog on the top that's basically just like a fiberglass tube. And then if anybody is old enough to remember an 88 Chevy van, they were the ones that had the engines behind the seat. So in the hot dog, the engine was what we called the doghouse, and then you climbed up and over, and it was a bench seat. But because it was like all made to fit inside this narrow fiberglass tube, it was just a piece of plywood that had the hooks like you use in a restroom door, the kind that go, and the little thing slides in. That's a terrible visual, sorry. The little things, they had those on either side, and then just a little foam seat on the top. And the windows were like this big and this big. So if we had hit anything, aside from the inappropriate jokes that would follow, we also would have been totally trapped between the engine and these tiny windows. Oh. And the seats would have pulled forward. It had lap belts, but they were totally useless. And they had a CB radio. Oh. And then there were two seats that faced the back behind the doghouse, and then in the back part of the dog, it was storage for all of our program was called Talent Search, because we were doing auditions. And so we had all sorts of equipment.
Okay. Another
We did
question.
not have hot dogs in it. Everybody knows that. No hot dogs, just wiener whistles.
I didn't figure that.
Yeah.
What are the highlights of your role at UNC?
Oh man, there are lots of them. I mean, it sounds rather cliche, but I like the people the most. I don't have a traditional HR background, aside from the fact that I started by driving a Wienermobile. I came here from the University of Wisconsin, where I was chief of staff to 3 chancellors over 7 years. And prior to that, I'd done alumni and development work. And so I have a very non-traditional HR background, but I do have sort of a belief in how all of the things at a place like Carolina are connected, and that really people are the engine that make what we do so great. So I know it sounds a little bit cliche, but I think the people are my favorite part. I would not say Carolina blue. It is not my favorite color. I will be honest about that. The people, it's a little bit hard right now because, you know, I'm sitting at my dining room table. I haven't seen anybody in a really long time. So I do feel like there's a lot of things, like just walking across campus or being able to get a cup of tea at the union or students' doors. I miss some of those things more acutely, and they're the little things. The big ones we can all pick. You know, I love to be in the stadium for a basketball game, or you know, I love all that stuff too. But it's the little things that I miss the most.
Yeah. All right. Great. I think we're all missing some of that right now, as we're in week 12.
Yes, week 137. Yes.
I have been counting.
Yeah.
So you led into one of my next questions, because you did undergrad in Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Grad school in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
Your doctorate in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And then went back to Wisconsin to work.
Sort of. So I did my undergraduate at Dickinson College in Pennsylvania, and then I went back to Wisconsin to drive the Wienermobile. And then I went to Washington, D.C., where I worked for Smithsonian Magazine. And then I decided I wanted to do medical education and maybe go back to med school. But I was really interested in the tie between medicine and higher ed. So I went to Wisconsin for graduate school, got my master's in higher education, bombed the MCAT, learned again for the second time that I was not ready to go to medical school. This time, really, somebody else told me that, as opposed to me telling myself that. And then immediately after getting my master's in higher education management, I took a job with the Alumni Association, and I worked at the Wisconsin Alumni Association for 8 years. And I got a call one day asking if I would apply for the executive director job at UNC Greensboro. And I was like, oh, that's super nice of you. But, you know, I have a house here. I really like it in Madison. But just out of curiosity, where did you get my name? And they told me my boss. That was and I was like, oh, is she trying to tell me something that I don't know? Like, am I supposed to leave? Well, she was a UNCG alum and decided that she thought I was ready. And I didn't have any interest in coming to North Carolina, but I felt like I should interview as a result of this sort of recommendation. So I came to North Carolina and I interviewed, and they called me the moment my airplane landed back in Wisconsin and offered me the job. And with each passing hour of the 9-hour interview, I began to think, like, maybe I do want to be in North Carolina. So I came to North Carolina in 2006. I spent a couple of years at UNCG. I probably would have stayed longer, but my father had a kidney transplant and was not doing well. And my wife, partner at the time, wanted to go to law school, and Wisconsin offered her money. And I knew I could get another job in Wisconsin. So we moved back. I took a job in development, and almost like 6 months later, the chief of staff job opened up, and I felt embarrassed about applying because I had just had another organization move me across the country, but I was sort of interested in the job. So I threw my hat in the ring without telling anybody. And then I got an interview, and then I had to tell people because then I got the job. And I did that I worked for Biddy Martin, who's now at Amherst and is an amazing amazing chancellor and a really outstanding woman. We had lots of conflict with the system office, and she left. And then David Ward was the second chancellor. He had been the chancellor once before and came back as an interim, and he was there for 2 years. And in that time, I decided I wanted to get my doctorate. And because I am crazy, I decided it would be best to do it while I was working full time and do a 22-month doctoral program that included coursework and a dissertation at Penn. So I commuted from Wisconsin to Philly once a month to get my doctorate, and did that for 22 months. And I finished my doctorate in 14 and then stayed at Wisconsin for another year and then moved here.
Well, welcome back.
Yeah, so I didn't, it wasn't as many back and forth, but mostly I moved back and forth between North Carolina and Wisconsin. But I'm done. It's too cold there.
That is what I was noticing. I was going to be like, I would say you lived in a lot of places, but you really only lived back and forth between two. Yeah. So
I have no interest in going back to where there's snow regularly. So all is well.
Oh, well, lucky you. I miss snow, so it's just okay. I
would have liked a little this year. I didn't like that we didn't get any.
Just like 2 inches is all I need. I'm good.
Yeah.
You know.
Twice a winter. That would be perfect.
There you go. Just enough for it to hit and they call condition 3. And then
bingo.
Then we get the day.
Because if it's condition 2, my life is miserable for weeks.
Well, I bet so. Not only with just the whole logistical things, and then on top of that, all the complaints about condition 2, because no one completely understands condition 2.
Right. Exactly.
So not having an HR background, what interested you the most in working in HR, and why? Or was it the people?
It was the people. So when I came here, I was recruited here in part. I didn't have a background in EO either. So when I first came here, I was the Senior Associate Vice Chancellor in the Division of Workforce Strategy, Equity, and Engagement. And at the time, the division included HR, Title IX and EO, and diversity and inclusion. And I was recruited here to serve sort of 2 roles. One is sort of a chief of staff across the division, and then to functionally be responsible for Title IX and equal opportunity and compliance. And I didn't have an EO background either, but we were trying to figure out a way to operationalize the planning that this campus-wide task force had done in recreating the university's omnibus policy on discrimination and harassment, and then try to plug it into these other spaces. And as a result of that and the setup of the division, I got to learn a lot about HR. And certainly in my previous job, particularly as chief of staff, I had learned, I touched all of these issues in a million ways, but usually just the negative ones. When somebody does something really egregious or ends up in a grievance, those are the things I saw, not all the really great things that people do every day in their workspaces. So at some level, I would say when Vice Chancellor Washington left to follow Chancellor Folt to USC, I sort of fell into the role at some level. I think that's just honesty. I came from a place where there was a system, and so I was very familiar with the rules and a lot of the things that we don't control in HR here. And I had a commitment to being transparent with people that I think I had tried to demonstrate in EO, but I felt like we needed really badly in the HR space. So I would say that my interest in HR is really about trying to demonstrate connection and connect people and mission more than it is about trying to connect an expertise in transactional processes. We have a lot of people who are experts in that. I am far more interested in saying, how do we match what we want to do as a mission and have the people align with that? And then how does that connect across the various parts of our organization? We're a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. And people are our biggest asset. And that's really important to me. I'm not answering your question at all, but I'm doing a lot of talking.
No, it is fun. It is all very interesting. We are good. So we'll go on to some work from home stuff. So have you developed any new habits since you've been working from home for the past 3 months?
You mean aside from the fact that every day around 11:22, I want a glass of champagne?
That could be your new habit. It
Yeah, but it's
probably
frowned
can't
upon
carry
when
it.
I show up later. I have been very consistent in maintaining that I do not drink during the day. But no, seriously, I am a big champagne drinker, and my wife and I don't speak a lick of French, not a word. And when I try, I get this like deer in the headlights, like, anglais. I mean, I can say English, that's it. But we, prior to the pandemic, had been taking advantage of the direct Raleigh to Paris flight. And I am like I'm trouble because I really like to find travel deals.
Yes.
And I really like champagne. So we were taking the direct flight. And on this last trip, we brought back 29 bottles. And then we were purchasing from other places, and we have some memberships in California. And my wife said to me shortly after the pandemic started, we have 47 bottles. And I was like, oh my gosh, Heather, we have to stop, no more. And like 3 days later, a box showed up. And I was like, where did this come from? And she said, well, I actually ordered it before I counted. What is wrong? Like, we don't need this much. There's 2 of us. So I think it's fair to say I put a big dent in that. And that is not something I'm remarkably proud of, but it makes me feel good. I also have a Peloton, so I've been riding more. And I run a couple mornings in the, and that's like been one of my only outings. I am actually high risk, and so I'm not allowed to do anything. Heather lets me drive the car, but I'm not allowed to go in anywhere. And we have 2 dogs who are very insistent on one being supervisors, and they're both vying for Employee of the Month. And they basically force us to keep some regular schedule. So there is a lot of dog walking in that is my new pandemic habit.
Okay. Well, listen, no shame here. We are all about self-care and getting through this. So, my suggestion was either going to be, you have 2 options: either stop ordering or start drinking. You get one or the other.
Yeah.
One is more fun than the other. So
Right.
And I'm just going to let that serve as the next question. What is your favorite work from home snack? Well, no, we're going to let you say work from home snack because we don't do that during the work day. We say
Yeah.
for after.
My favorite work from home snack. I am a huge fan of Smitten Kitchen brown butter sea salt Rice Krispie treats, which is really just a Rice Krispie treat, except you brown the butter before instead of just melted butter, it's brown, and then you add sea salt. I have no willpower. When I make them, the whole pan, gone. It's so bad that it cuts the roof of my mouth. Don't care, eat them all.
Tried those. I will be asking you for the recipe.
Smitten Kitchen, I can send the link. It's excellent website.
I'd love it.
Excellent.
So we have some interest about your time at Smithsonian Magazine. What was your role there?
I was an editorial assistant. So something that's sort of interesting about Smithsonian Magazine is they are 98, or were at the time, 98% unsolicited manuscripts. So unlike a lot of magazines that will say, oh, I want Keith to write an article on this, and I want Drew to write an article on this, they just say, send us what you want to write about, and we'll decide whether we want to read it or want to contract you. And they have some regular writers, but they also just take unsolicited manuscripts. So I read between 4,000 and 6,000 of those unsolicited manuscript requests a year, the proposals. And I would look through the database and find out whether we'd already written an article on that or whether there was somebody else who'd done something sort of close. And then I would write sort of a customized form letter to deny 98% of them. And then I would move the ones along that I thought like, oh, well, we haven't written about this and this seems sort of interesting. Like maybe we should do a feature on salt and pepper shaker collections or whatever it might be. And so I did that for about a year, but Smithsonian Magazine was actually one of the only remaining magazines that did paper editing. Everybody else had moved to online editing at that point in time. So while I wasn't I didn't get into the work. I got assigned there as a temporary and then essentially made it a permanent job. But I didn't get into the work to do magazine publishing, but I really wouldn't have had a future if I wanted to go anywhere other than Smithsonian Magazine, because they hadn't done online editing. So there were no skills that I was really bringing from there to anywhere else. So it was good to go to graduate school then.
Okay.
But the best part of working at Smithsonian Magazine is all of those Smithsonian buildings are connected by underground tunnels. So I worked in the one that was the castle, and I would go to lunch in the Air and Space Museum employee cafeteria, which is up on the roof of the Air and Space Museum. But I got there by underground tunnels, and then would take the elevator, and the view of the Capitol from the Air and Space Museum employee cafeteria is one of the best in Washington.
Did not know they were all connected.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
See, I could literally go to all of them and never go outside.
Well, you could if you had access.
In theory.
Yes. Well, and what I don't know, this was back in 1997, I think. I don't know, like, if the newest ones, either the Native American or the African American Museum, I don't know whether they're connected underground in the same way, but at least on that side of the mall, all of them were at the time.
That would be glorious. I hate going outside.
You said you like snow. How do these two?
I do. I love snow. I like to see it from my window.
Oh.
And see how pretty it is, and then get back in the bed. Like that's like my extent of snow. So, we have a few anthropology questions.
Oh no!
It's not about the study of, or
okay.
What influenced you to study it, and do you miss it?
I was influenced by a couple of great faculty members, which I feel like is appropriate given what we do. And it's funny, I don't know that I miss the study so much, but I am very much I'm naturally curious, and I definitely do a lot of qualitative assessment of my surroundings and the people I'm with. And that very much has carried through from my anthropology study into the way I approach the world. And it even showed in the way I did my dissertation. I did a qualitative study, and it was basically an sort of a sociological understanding of how college presidents handle crisis. And I was really focused on participant interviews, and as opposed to many of my colleagues who did much more quantitative stuff. So I think it really informed a lot of the way I think, but I don't know that I miss it in terms of the direct study.
Okay. So you mentioned sports earlier. Big sports fan?
Huge.
All right. I am as well. Of all UNC sports, what is your favorite to watch?
Go Badgers. Wisconsin basketball.
Okay. That's not a real thing here. So, like at UNC, what is your favorite thing to watch? It's like, is it still Go Badgers? It's like, I can suffer through anything, but I'm really not pulling for it.
You do remember that the Badgers beat Duke in the what was it? I can't remember what year the Final Four was. That was like a big, we're doing our part for UNC.
Yes, that made me very happy.
Yeah. And we beat Kentucky. 17 wins and done. Anyway, so I'm a huge sports fan. I admit to having a much harder time watching football than I ever used to. I just really struggle with the head injury stuff. And, more broadly, I really worry about sort of the nature of the NCAA and how we provide for amateur athletes in general, and particularly young men of color. I worry about the enterprise, and I admit to having some dissonance because I am a fan in so many ways, and that's been a real sort of mental struggle for me. At UNC, I think I'd say college basketball is probably my favorite, as long as they're not playing the Badgers. I the one thing about basketball in the Midwest is there are a lot fewer 9 p.m. games. I am a early to bed kid, so the 9 p.m. games are a little bit brutal. And I will admit, I gave my tickets away more than I used them this past year because it's just a little hard to make it to those games. I live in Durham, so by the time I left the game and got home, I felt like that's a terrible mistake. And it's just an indicator of just how old I am, but it's the reality. I'd rather watch it on TV at that point.
Yeah. The 2 games I went to this past year were actually 2 9 p.m. games my friend invited. I'm like, we're not really friends, are we? You just give me the 2 o'clock on a Saturday game or something.
Exactly.
Like,
exactly. I took my dad and my stepmom who were visiting. They live in Wisconsin. They winter in Florida, and they were on their way. And I took them to the Big Ten ACC Challenge. So it was Ohio State, and Ohio State was ranked 4, and we were ranked 2 or something. I mean, this is early in the season before we, but it was really fun to take my dad to the Dean Dome, and he spent the whole time just being like, look at all these championship banners. And he and I used to go every year. When I worked in the chancellor's office, I had tickets for everything. And we'd go every year to the Big Ten tournament together. I got my love of ball from my dad. And it was either in Indianapolis or Chicago every year. And we'd go on Wednesday night and we'd watch like 14 games straight until Sunday afternoon. And it was like the greatest thing ever. So since I moved here, he doesn't have any idea what my job is, but he was pleased to know that I was able to get him tickets to the Dean Dome, because it felt like, oh, well, she must be doing something important. In fact, when the notice came out that I was named vice chancellor, I sent it to my dad and my stepmom, and I said, I just wanted you to see this. And he called me and he goes, congratulations, Vice Chancellor for Human. You could hear him reading it. And then he goes, this seems like an awful lot of nice stuff. Is that all just bullshit? So, I mean, he's telling it like it is.
I love it. I love it. We have a question. So you've had some career changes.
Yes.
1 or 2. What advice could you share about making a change in direction of your career or life for others?
Never be afraid to change, and is probably the biggest piece of advice I'd give. And don't underestimate how much skills can transfer if you really spend some time thinking about what the work is. I mean, at the end of the day, so much of work, I think, is about listening to people, understanding what their needs are, and then trying to figure out solutions that address those needs in tandem with whatever the organization's mission is. And if you can break things down into really sensible, small bits of information, I was able to do this project in this way in this office. And when you think about it, it very much looks like this would look in this office. If you can really start talking about that and demonstrate it, I mean, I'm an anthropology major pre-med, and now I'm a vice chancellor for human resources. I mean, there is not a direct path, and nobody goes to college saying, well, maybe somebody does, but I hope I can be that one day. I mean, I just think we have to be better about talking about the ways that we work can transfer into other things.
So when you were at the University of Wisconsin, did you use their student union a lot?
I did.
Okay.
And
what features did they have that were really cool?
Well, there are several. One is they are one of the only remaining unions that serves alcohol and in the union. So there are 2 separate student unions on campus. And they rebuilt the second one in my second tour of duty at Wisconsin, and it's called Union South, and it's quite impressive. They built a hotel on the top of it, minimal numbers, but that my wife and I got married in the one union and stayed in the other union on the other side of campus. The main union is actually an old war memorial, and it's on Lake Mendota. So it sits right on the lake, and the front area is called the terrace. And there are specific chairs. They're green, yellow, and orange, and they are only made for the Memorial Union in Madison, Wisconsin. And they sit outside. And when the terrace chairs come out, everybody knows late spring has arrived, and this is where you hang out. And every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, they do live music on the terrace overlooking the lake. Lake Mendota actually is home to the nation's oldest rowing club and sailing club. You wouldn't think of Wisconsin as a huge destination for sailing, but oddly enough, it is a source, and they have both a really strong rowing team and a union-driven recreational group called Hoofers that runs the sailing club. The union also had top-notch food, incredible food. But mostly it was the location being right on the water. It was the place to go. Well, I should say the other thing that's sort of amazing about the union there is Wisconsin has its own dairy, and they make their own ice cream. And Babcock is the dairy, and Babcock ice cream is sold in their dairy store in the union, and then you can buy it by pints in a few grocery stores. But by the scoop, you can only get it in the union and the dairy store. And so the place to go in Madison is to go sit at the union and either have a beer or an ice cream cone or both and overlook the water. It's amazing. There's a lot of things I miss about Madison, but that is by far one of the biggest ones.
It sounds pretty amazing, but your missing them doesn't outweigh your not wanting to ever see snow again. So
right, and they have a lot of the same issues we do in terms of really difficult political situation between the state and the university system, struggling financials with the university system. They have far fewer blue skies than we do, so enduring some of those things is a little more complicated. But in terms of the structure of the institution, we're very, very similar. And in that way, I feel very much at home at Carolina, but I get a little more sunshine.
Yeah. All right. So next week, I hear you're on vacation next week.
I am.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Leads actually into one of our questions. Where is on your travel bucket list and why?
Oh, the list is long, very long. Heather and I are really avid travelers, and actually I was scheduled to be on would it be this week? Next week we would be leaving. I was supposed to be hosting a General Alumni Association tour to Denmark and Sweden. And I have to say, this is remarkably privileged, and I acknowledge that, but it's one of the things I'm most sad about the pandemic, because I didn't ask to go on that trip. It was one they invited me on. And that is a place I wanted to go, but hadn't really ever made any effort. Mostly our trips lately have been driven around either Sunshine or Champaign, which are also great. But I was really, really excited. And I was excited to travel with other Tar Heels as well. And when the trip was canceled, I admit to feeling really, really sad, and more so than I expected to be. But I would say I really, really want to spend some time in Vietnam, in Cambodia, and Thailand. I'd like to pedal, ideally ride a bike through some of Vietnam. I went to, I got my doctorate with a good friend who lives in Norway. I'd like to go. I was hoping to visit him as a part of that trip. I'd love to spend some time down under. I've not been there. I have actually been to Antarctica, so I feel like I have the most difficult continent crossed off, but I'm missing a few others. And so I'd like to I'd like to really spend some time, take a couple of trips that allow me to be gone for 2.5 or 3 weeks, so I can spend some real time in a place. I just don't really have a job that allows that right now.
Okay, I feel like you need to take a couple minutes to tell us about this Antarctica thing.
Much like here, the General Alumni Association runs alumni tours all over the globe. And when I was at Wisconsin at the Alumni Association, one of the employee perks was after you'd been there for a certain amount of time, they invited you to host a tour. And while I was at Wisconsin, I did 3. And the first one I did was a polar bear expedition to northern Canada to Churchill. And Churchill you can only get to by train or by plane. They don't have cars there, but it's the world's most populous place for polar bears. And they drive around in tundra buggies, and you can see them and visit. And that's pretty cool. And then my second trip, I was invited to host a cruise to Antarctica. And we spent a few days in Buenos Aires. And then we went down to the southernmost tip of Chile and at Ushuaia, the southernmost point, and got on a boat. And we sailed through the Drake Passage. And then we landed on a number of islands on the Antarctic shelf, and we'd go on these little zodiacs and hang out with penguins and seals, and the calving of the icebergs was amazing. And it was the quietest I'd ever heard, because there's no ambient noise. You don't hear airplanes, you don't hear cars, you don't hear the hum of lights. I mean, it is like eerie quiet, and then all of a sudden an iceberg will calf and it'll just make this enormous eruption noise. I tried to read a book while I was on that trip, and I kept rereading the same line because I'd read something and then I'd just have to look up. It was so majestic. It was really an incredible trip. And I traveled with like 40 other people who were connected to the University of Wisconsin, and it was pretty cool. Yeah.
Sounds kind of amazing.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, this next question, I have to ask this, or else the person that is asking it will probably literally kill me. They say they love your haircut and want to know, who is your hairstylist?
Well, thank you. So Annie Mercer at Lavish, which is over on 54, right before 40, does my hair. I haven't been able to go see her. So my wife has cut the back and I've cut the front twice in the last 10 weeks or 11 weeks. But Annie is generally the source of all the goodness. I am actually medically compromised, so I'm not allowed to leave the house. So I've had to do it myself. But really, I've just been following Annie's work. So Annie Mercer, she's the woman.
All right, there you have it. Let's see here. Thinking of leadership, what are the best tips on working with teams and reaching goals?
Run. No, I'm kidding. I think most of the best tips for working with teams are very, very, they sometimes aren't obvious. And I think when I did my dissertation, this was one of the things that I struggled with the most, because it's one of the things that I think makes it so difficult to do some of the work we do at Chapel Hill. And that is, surround yourself with people who are very, very different than yourself, and recognize that the work is going to become that much harder, because there's all sorts of data and research to show that the best teams are the most diverse teams, and they come up with the best solutions and the most interesting results or work products or whatever it may be, the most innovative, but they also take the longest and create the most turmoil along the way. So that is to say, it's going to be harder to do it that way, to bring people who maybe you automatically disagree with into your teamwork, but you're going to create a better result. And to me, that's sort of the way we talk about diversity on our campus more broadly. Like, we are only better when not just by saying everyone has a voice and everybody's voice matters, but rather we can only be our best when everyone has a place and feels safe to fully participate, and their voice is fully contributing. So that our best work requires every individual to bring their own past experience and work product to the table, and then we do our best work. It's not enough to say everyone matters. We have to really show it, and we can demonstrate that we can be our best when we do so. And that's a really clumsy way of saying it. But I think my advice really in teams and in general, is to surround yourself with people who think differently and who force you to ask hard questions or push yourself in a different way. Of course, sometimes that's not always possible. Sometimes you just are assigned teams and you have to work with them. And I think then it becomes challenging yourself to assume a different role. Like my wife will tell you, I inherently am a problem solver. I try to jump in, I take the lead. And there are times when I really, really have to do everything I can to sit on my hands and sit back and let someone else take the lead. And I would challenge people to figure out, or to at least try sitting in a different role on that team and see what differs. Like, how does it make you feel? Why do you think it makes you feel that way? What does it change about what you produce as a team? What does it bring out in other people? And do a little bit of evaluation on that as well. And then, so it was leadership about teams and something else. There was a second part of that.
I don't know. Drew took the question away. So
okay. We'll leave it at that.
We can leave it at that because that was a great answer.
It was working with teams, reaching goals.
Reaching goals.
Oh,
yeah.
I think that was a pretty awesome answer. So we can let that one lie.
So what makes you laugh the most?
Oh gosh, it doesn't take much. I'm a little bit like an 8-year-old boy. Like, you give me a good fart joke and I'm good to go. But really, I laugh at myself a lot because I'm really just a mess. Sometimes it's amazing to me that I have managed to be as successful as I at least pretend to be, because some days it's just sort of a miracle. Heather and I laugh a lot. I feel lucky, at least in the midst of the pandemic, to be stuck at home with someone who I think is funny and get a kick out of and like being around. I actually worry about those who are stuck at home with people either that they don't really enjoy, or worse yet, are afraid of. That makes me less sad and does not make me laugh. Actually makes me really sad. And like I said, we have 2 dogs. Ramona is the younger of the 2. She's just a little over 1. She very much, if you read Beverly Cleary's books, it was Ramona the Pest, and Ramona very much lives up to the name. She is just a straight up mess and pest. We call her the Romonster. And she makes me laugh every single day. But like I said, it doesn't take much. I tend to laugh. And, any stupid Twitter meme or Instagram meme, I'll laugh at, because, again, it doesn't take much.
If you could choose to do anything for a day, what would it be?
For a day?
Mm-hmm.
I thought you were going to ask me if I could do something else in life.
Well, you can answer that as well, because we did have a question. If the position you're in is in your end goal, like as far as your career.
Well, it depends on the day. So, if I could do anything for a day, I'm going to have to come back on that one. Now I'm going to think about. So, if I could do something else, if it's my end goal, no, I don't think so, but I don't know what is. For a while, I really thought I would be interested in being a college president. I'm not sure if that's really true. I really, really love soft serve ice cream, and I sort of have this dream of having a soft serve truck. Heather likes to remind me that I would hate working all the time, and that just because you like soft serve doesn't mean you should have a truck, and that I would not have health insurance and I wouldn't make any money. So that seems sort of untenable, but I really love soft serve. And let me be honest, there is not good soft serve around here. Like, there just isn't. And it makes me really, really sad. I also would, if I could pick a skill that I really want to grow, it's like, construction. Like, I really like to build and do things with my hands, and I like to pretend I'm an amateur builder in small things, but I'd like to learn how to add on to my house and put up the tile and put up the walls, and I'll leave the electricity and the plumbing to someone else. But if I could do that, I would. I took some furniture building classes a number of years ago, and I sort of like got a love for big tools. God, I sound like such a weirdo. I don't know what I would do for a day. That's a really good question. I don't have an answer.
Okay. And you know what I'm loving about this is like you are literally answering, or in my mind, you're answering questions that I haven't even asked yet that are over here on the side. Like,
oh, really?
What Wisconsin food you miss? And I'm just gonna take a stab at it and say like good soft serve ice cream because
yes. And weirdly, I mean, if you guys have recommendations, I need this. So I'm going to give two pieces of very random, disconnected advice because it's something that made me think about this. So we had really good Thai and Laotian food in Madison, which I don't entirely understand because I don't think there is a pretty big Laotian population. That is true, but I don't know about Thai. I don't really know about good Thai food here, and I would need some better recommendations. And the other thing is, if you ever have anybody that you want to welcome to a new community, like if somebody moves to visit or comes to your area or is joining your staff, one of the most valuable gifts I have ever received was a notebook that somebody had written: best burger, best hike, best Thai food, best pizza, best weekend trip, best car dealership. And they had invited all of their friends to just fill out the answer. So when I got to the area, I had this book of like, oh, I should order Thai food from this place and I should go to this car dealership. And it was like a Yelp in a notebook, but it was from people that I felt like I trusted. So anyway, that's totally random. And you didn't ask that question, and I don't know why I thought of it, but nonetheless, that was on my mind.
I love it. I really do. And I'm still waiting to find good Thai food anywhere. Like I'm willing to drive 30 minutes to like
yes.
sit and eat it, maybe even 45 if it's good enough, you know, but I haven't found it yet.
We have pretty good stuff in Cary, but I sort of want something close that can be delivered.
All right. So if you had to choose, would you choose North Carolina barbecue or Wisconsin cheese curds?
Cheese curds.
Oh, that makes my heart hurt. Seriously?
Well,
Are those the ones like if you eat them, they're kind of squeaky?
yes, but they're best when they're deep fried.
Oh, well, you're talking now. We're in the South. We deep fry everything.
Yeah.
That may work for me.
So here's let me be clear. I mean, I love North Carolina barbecue, but North Carolina barbecue is best when you can have hush puppies on the side. And I'm a celiac, so I can't have hush puppies. So I don't need any of that with cheese. So.
Okay. So we're at 1:57. We go to 2:00. Here's my I probably have two more questions. This is my personal question. The Tiger King, have you seen it?
The first 2 episodes. And she for sure killed her husband.
And fed him to the tigers, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not just me. She she received all his money. Well, now they found out his will was a forgery. This was in the news like yesterday. So you need to finish and then we can talk about it.
Okay. So I admit I stopped watching it because I really only can lately watch things that make me feel good. I am very easily like annoyed by news and negative things. So I've been watching the old episodes because I'm all caught up on the current season of the Great British Baking Show. And now I'm watching We're Here. Have you seen this about the drag queens?
No, I haven't seen that.
The drag queens who go visit small towns across America.
Oh, I haven't seen
It's
that.
excellent. I think it's Netflix, but I'm not sure. Maybe it's just, I don't know.
All right.
It's excellent.
Do you like Broadway musicals?
I do. I've seen Hamilton four times.
Well,
with
Disney
Lin-Manuel Miranda and the original cast.
Okay, well,
But
Disney Plus is airing Hamilton, one of the original. Yeah, on July 3rd. I'm excited.
Yes.
I'm excited.
I'm terribly excited.
All right, so we'll wrap up with one question. It's probably going to be the question that I ask every person that does this. Who do you think would be good as a guest on Ask Me Anything?
Ooh. I think highly entertaining would be Mike Barker as the head of ITS. The guy talks with like enormous words. He's a philosopher by training. And I think it's always interesting that somebody who has a doctorate in philosophy is now running IT. I think that's a really interesting lineup or link. And another indicator that anthropology, HR, philosophy, IT. So I think, and he's, I think, an interesting guy just but straight up. Let me see, who else would I put on that list? Oh, I can think of a bunch of people, but do you take people from anywhere?
We'll take them from anywhere.
Anywhere. Okay. Well, I don't want to just give you people that work on my team, but I mean, Brandon Washington's a really interesting guy. And I mean, I think came to his work as the head of EO in sort of a interesting way. I think there are a number of people in counsel's office who I think are sort of I mean, anybody who's a lawyer, you sort of wonder what they're like behind them. I say that, and my wife's an attorney, but I think they're an interesting bunch. I hang out with a lot of like administrative sorts. So I'm mostly, I like it when I get to hang out with people other than the straight, OUC and finance and whatever. I like to be with the people, but they're the ones I spend the most time with. I think Steve Agostini in finance is a really interesting guy. And he's got a really, he's got a really interesting background in terms of working for federal government and state government. Can I also ping you with more names as I think about that?
Absolutely.
All right.
All right. So that wraps up our second edition of Ask Me Anything. And from me and Drew and everyone at the union and everyone that participated, thank you so much for taking the time to do this today. Hope you enjoyed it. I know I enjoyed it. I learned a lot, and I truly appreciate it.
I enjoyed it tremendously. I'm just sad I didn't get to ask the questions back, and I feel a little bit sad that I couldn't see anybody because I feel like, hello, I'm just talking at you. But yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. This was lovely.
All right, thank you. And you all have a good rest of your day.
You too. Cheers.
Satina and Wayne, turn your cameras off. Get out. Get out. Leave. We done. Y'all just turned it on. You probably ain't even in.